And ever since then, I have been voting for Republicans. I've never voted for a Democrat. And,
wow.
and so the fact that I believe so strongly that in this election, we need to elect the person who is the responsible adult. And we need... And there is a lot, both parties do it. There is a lot of vilification that goes on.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for people to think very carefully about the power that we're going to invest in the President of the United States and what it would mean to give that power to Donald Trump. Don't take my word for who he is. Listen to him every day. Look at what he did. Remember that the people, as the Vice President said, who are opposing him are the people who know him best, the people who worked most closely with him. And so I would just say I know that the Vice President has had the range of experience, as Vice President, as Senator, as Attorney General of California. She is supremely qualified to be President of the United States. I think sometimes there are some men who suggest that she's not, but if you look at her qualifications, there's no question. And that she's somebody that I know I can count on who will put the good of this country first. There's just no question.
Okay. I want to go over here to Cecilia Borland. Can you stand up? You have a question. Cecilia grew up in Birmingham, Michigan, which was a Republican stronghold as she grew up. She now lives with her husband. They're raising 2 children in Berkeley, Michigan, and she's here with a question for the Vice President.
Thank you both for coming to Michigan today for this important event. I'd like to start by saying personally, thank you, Representative Cheney, for to you and your father for exemplifying putting country over party. And Madam Vice President, I hope you had a wonderful birthday yesterday.
Thank you. Thank you.
From the shootings at Oxford High School to my alma mater, Michigan State University, to an attack at a kid's splash pad this summer, just a few miles away from here, the issue of gun violence hits very close to home for our community. Just yesterday, I learned from our school district that my preschooler will be going through his first active shooter drill this week.
Yeah.
As a gun violence survivor and mother of 2 young children, the issue of gun violence and the safety of my children in their schools and in our community is my top priority. Madam Vice President, if you are elected president and there is a Republican majority in Congress, how will you work with them to make impactful and immediate progress around gun violence, especially in our children's schools?
Right. Thank you, Cecilia. And thank you for your courage to speak up about this. So, well, we have done it actually in the last 4 years. We had a bipartisan group of folks in Congress who came together for the Safer Communities Act, which is the first meaningful piece of gun safety legislation in 30 years. And so it's a good step, and it really does tell us that we have a will within the United States Congress to work in a bipartisan way. And then Congresswoman Cheney was one of those Republicans that actually voted for it. This is how I think of the issue, and it is through the lens of many experiences, including I'm so sorry about your kids going through active shooter drills. Our kids did. It's traumatic. That our children, you know, growing up, I'll speak for myself, we had fire drills. Yeah. Right? Our children are now learning how to keep themselves safe if there's an active shooter at their school. I did a tour last year of colleges with college-aged kids, so I also did some trade schools. And I would ask the auditorium would be packed, college-age kids, and I'd ask them, raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade you had to endure an active shooter drill. Almost every hand went up. Our kids are growing up where they are learning that they may be unsafe in the classroom, where they should be absorbing the wonders of the world. One kid said to me, we were talking about this, and said to me, yeah, that's why I don't like going to fifth period. I said, why, sweetheart? Why don't you like going to fifth period? Because in that classroom, there's no closet in which to hide. So when we think of this issue, we must also consider the trauma that is the trauma of the direct trauma for those who have been directly affected by gun violence, including that to our kids who are in schools across our country doing this, not to mention their teachers who want to teach and not also have to worry about, will they be able to physically protect a child from a bullet? Here's how I think about it in terms of the macro point. We have been pushing as a country, I think, a false choice that suggests you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. And that's a false choice. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. I have talked about the fact both Tim Walz and I are gun owners. I also believe we need reasonable gun safety laws, assault weapons bans, red flag laws, universal background checks. And reports say that the majority of NRA members agree on, for example, universal background checks. What is a universal background check? It's just common sense. Here's what it is. You just might want to know, before someone can buy a lethal weapon, whether they've been found by a court to be a danger to themselves or others. You just might want to know. It's common sense. We need common sense gun safety laws, and I will continue, I've done it throughout my career, work with all of our colleagues across the aisle, and I know that we can make progress. But this is not, I'm not trying to take anybody's guns away from them, but we need reasonable gun safety laws.
Okay, I want to come back to the issue of public safety in a minute, but first we want to go to Martin. Thank you, Cecilia, very much. Martin Hauerlich, he's a former Republican member of the Michigan House of Representatives, and he's here with a question about national security.
Well, thank both of you for being here this afternoon. I really appreciate your coming to the state of Michigan to be here. I would like to ask, what can the U.S. do politically, economically, or militarily to deter Russia from continuing its war on the independent nation of Ukraine while simultaneously strengthening our own U.S. security interests?
Thank you, Martin.
Go ahead.
So I was actually in Munich at the Munich Security Conference delivering a speech when I first met with President Zelensky of Ukraine, and it was just days before Russia invaded. I've now met with President Zelensky, I think, 7 times, because the United States has rightly taken a position as a leader, a global leader on international rules and norms, that we must stand in support of one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of protecting sovereignty and territorial integrity, the importance of standing strong in opposition to the notion that in this case, Russia would attempt to change borders by force, to invade another nation, a sovereign nation, by force. And sadly, there is a huge difference between my opponent and me on this very fundamental issue. Back to the conversation about, there was a time when we used to, there was a phrase that I'll paraphrase, that basically politics ends at the sea line, at the boundaries of our country. That there are certain things, in particular the matters of national security, where it's not about partisanship, it's about where should America stand in terms of supporting our allies and standing for certain principles. I'll give you as a point of reference for me in terms of how I feel about this on the partisan issue. For the 4 years that I was in the United States Senate, my favorite committee was the Senate Intelligence Committee. And I served on that committee, and we would meet in a room that's called a SCIF, and it's basically it's a very secure room. No press, with all due respect, is allowed in, no cameras. Everyone has to leave their cell phone outside. It's a bipartisan committee, and we would go in that room and receive classified information from America's intelligence community, sometimes our military leaders, about hotspots around the world and threats to our national security. And when we went in that room, and this is why it was my favorite committee, people would take off their suit jacket, roll up their sleeves, have a cup of coffee on the table. And we weren't Democrats or Republicans. We were Americans. And that is so important on a number of issues we are discussing this afternoon, but in particular on national security. My opponent, however, has made it a thing of his to admire dictators and autocrats around the world. He exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, remember that? He has openly praised the president of Russia. Most recently, the report is, in the height of COVID. Remember, everyone was scrambling to get their hands on COVID tests? Remember when Americans were dying by the hundreds every day, and Donald Trump secretly sent COVID tests to the president of Russia for his personal use? He has said, Donald Trump, I will solve the matter of Ukraine and Russia in a day. You know, read through and understand what he is saying. He would surrender. He would have Ukraine surrender its fight against an aggressor, violating its sovereignty. If Donald Trump were president, Vladimir Putin will be sitting in Kyiv and understand what that would mean for America and our standing around the world. But thankfully, there has been bipartisan support, and to your point of where you stand on this very fundamental issue. But this is a very vivid example of what is at stake in this election, because Donald Trump has been very clear. He would give away the shop. He has been manipulated and is so clearly able to be manipulated by favor and flattery, including from dictators and autocrats around the world. And America knows that that is not how we stand. That is not how we fight. We fight in favor of our strength and our role as a leader in bringing the allies together and standing for foundational and fundamental principles.
Congressman Cheney. I know kind of the issue of national security is one of the big reasons you're here and supporting the Vice President. Can you expand on that answer and add your thoughts to it?
Yeah, you know, I think that if you look at where the Republican Party is today, there's been a really dangerous embrace of isolationism, a dangerous embrace of tyrants. The president, you know, even just today, he heaps praise on the world's most evil people while he attacks, you know, with venom his political opponents here at home. And, you know, the reality is that since the end of World War II, America has led, and we've led, and that has been necessary to defend our freedom. And we can't do it by ourselves, though. We need our allies. And when Donald Trump says that he's going to withdraw from NATO, when he invites Vladimir Putin to invade NATO, when he suggests that it is Zelensky's fault that Ukraine was invaded, I mean, that is for anybody who is a Republican who is thinking that, you know, they might vote for Donald Trump because of national security policy, I ask you, please, please study his national security policy. Not only is it not Republican, it's dangerous. And without allies, America will find our very freedom and security challenged and threatened. And one final point on this, don't think that Congress can stop him. People say, well, you know what, he can't really do the worst, you know, because Congress will step in. All he has to do is what he's doing, is say, I won't fulfill our NATO treaty obligations. And NATO begins to unravel. So it is an incredibly dangerous thing to think about a foreign policy, a national security policy led by somebody who is as unstable as Donald Trump is, and it's a risk we just simply can't take as a nation.
And I'm going to add for emphasis that let's also be clear about, on this subject specifically of Ukraine, Donald Trump's approach would be to surrender. Understand what that would mean. That is signaling to the president of Russia he can get away with what he has done. Understand, look at the map. Poland would be next. NATO, our allies, are the reason that they have been so thankful for the position of strength we have taken in bringing the allies together, is because they are fully aware of, and remember, to the Congresswoman's point, World War II, remember, this concept of isolation, we were once there as a nation, and then Pearl Harbor happened. Let's remember, recent history, Europe remembers it well. Then when we got attacked, Pearl Harbor, we jumped in. And it is because America jumped in that we were ultimately able to win that war. And it should be a constant reminder to us, we have to remember history, that isolationism, which is exactly what Donald Trump is pushing, pull out of NATO, abandon our friends, isolationism is not insulation. It is not insulation. It will not insulate us from harm in terms of our national security. So I say that to emphasize a point that the Congresswoman made, and the other point I'd make is also check out where he's been on how he thinks about America's military and service members. One of the great, great American heroes, a prisoner of war, John McCain. Remember how he talked about John McCain? He said he didn't like him because he got caught. You look, he's called members of our military suckers and losers. And then look at how some of the highest ranking members of our military, including what I mentioned earlier, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a dedicated member, leader in America's military, how he has assessed Donald Trump. Fascism to his core. So
There are your talking points for the kitchen table. Our final question is from Courtney. Courtney, can you stand? Courtney Cabrera Agruza is a wife, a mom, an attorney, and she's a proud Chaldean, and she is here with a question. Courtney.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Madam Vice President Harris and Representative Cheney. My name is Courtney Cabrera Agruza, and I am a first-generation Chaldean American. Chaldeans are indigenous Iraqis who are Catholic, and we are predominantly in the Metro Detroit area. Chaldeans are a very close-knit community, but the recent political climate has really begun to divide us. While I know that you have discussed several bipartisan proposals over the course of your campaign, what would you say to people like myself who are part of these traditionally conservative communities who want to move forward but are feeling the pressures of the political divide?
thank you. And I've actually met with members and leaders in the Chaldean community, and thank you for being here. You know, I think that there is something at stake that is about core values as well as what is at stake in terms of the risk and the danger. And I would offer you an example of what I think would be an important issue that would affect the Chaldean community and all Americans. For example, the issue of how we think about healthcare in America. So I know enough about the culture and to know that it is reflective of who we are as Americans in general. We respect our elders. We take care of them. So I will share with you a specific proposal that is an extension of how I think about things. I actually, personal story, I took care of my mother when she was sick. And for anyone taking care of or who has taken care of an elder relative, you know what that is. It's about trying to cook something they feel like eating. It is trying to find clothes that don't irritate their skin or help them put on a sweater. It's about trying to figure out something you can say that will bring a smile to their face or make them laugh. It's about dignity. And we now have, in particular in our country, a lot of people doing that and also raising young kids. We call them the sandwich generation, right in the middle. It's a lot. And the way the system currently works, well, God willing, you may have enough resources, you can hire somebody to come in and help. If not, you may have to spend down all of your savings to be able to qualify for Medicaid. Or you may have to quit your job to be able to do what you need to do to take care of your children and take care of your older relative. That's just not right, and it's not fair. So part of my proposal and the plan is that we're going to now reconfigure so that Medicare covers home health care for our seniors, right? It's about dignity. So in addition to everything that we've discussed already about national security, what is at stake? Something like this, because I absolutely do believe America is ready for a new generation of leadership that is taking on issues clear-eyed about what is going on that affects everybody, doesn't matter their political party. Issues that are fundamentally about dignity, also about economic issues, and taking it on in a way that we relieve the American people of the burdens that get in the way of productivity and a certain quality of life. And this is one example of that. I believe we need to have an economy that I call an opportunity economy, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, not just get by, but get ahead. And this is one example I would offer under the broader point, which is about let's move forward, taking on problems from a common sense approach that is about just practical work. Look, I am a capitalist. I am a pragmatic capitalist. I will work as I have with the private sector. I believe we have to invest in America's economy and America's industry and America's entrepreneurs. And we can at the same time take care of those that are the most in need of just a little support to be able to not just get by, but get ahead.
Thank you, Courtney. Liz, I just want to, we have 2 minutes left. And when you hear the phrase, a new way forward, when you hear country over party, what does that mean to you? We're 2 weeks out. What does a new way forward mean for families like everybody here, for your children, my children, everybody's children, young men?
Yeah,
What is it like?
I think that we're at a moment now where, when you think about America and the beacon of hope that we have been for so many years, for so many communities, also how tremendously enriched we have been by communities, immigrants who want to come here and build a life, all of that depends upon fundamentally defending the rule of law, fundamentally defending our Constitution. That's what makes all of our opportunity and our freedom possible. And at the same time that we're that beacon for the world, it's also because we're a good nation.
Yeah.
And because, when you look at who our leader is going to be, what Donald Trump represents is in many ways just cruel, and not the kind of dignity and the kind of person that we all want to be able to look up to. But what I would say is that if people are uncertain, if people are thinking, well, I'm a conservative, I don't know that I can support Vice President Harris, I would say, I don't know if anybody's more conservative than I am. and I understand the most conservative value there is to defend the Constitution. And if we don't come together to do that, then and so just to finish that, I would say, to me, a new way forward is this. It's what you're seeing up here. It's having a president who will listen, having a president who will say, I'm not necessarily sure I agree with you on this issue or that issue, but let's talk about it. Yeah. Why do you want that policy? Why do you believe that? Someone who is willing to honor and respect all perspectives and points of views. And there's only one candidate in this race who does that, and that's Vice President Harris.
In fact, a lot of polling of undecided voters who call themselves the exhausted majority said, I just want leaders who listen to one another. I just want leaders who speak respectfully to one another. I want to see decency. I want to see people I can look up to. And unfortunately, that's considered a new way forward, as Representative
Let's
Cheney.
do that. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
We
Let's
should
make
do
that a way forward. The final word, Madam Vice President, you know, everybody I talk to says, you know, I have to turn off the news. I can't read anything. I'm meditating. I'm doing yoga. I'm so anxious. I just don't even know. I'm eating gummies, all kinds of things, you know. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Not eating gummies.
Okay, we got that clear. But how do you, how do you handle this, the anxiety, the stress, the turmoil? Everybody's freaked out. I talked to the gentleman up there, he's like, I'm so scared. A woman's like, I'm so anxious. I can't sleep. Do you sleep?
You know, I wake up in the middle of the night usually these days, so to be honest with you, but I work out every morning. I think that's really important to just kind of, you know, mind, body, and spirit. But let me just say this.
No, say more about that.
But
say more.
I will. I work out. I try to eat well. You know, I love my family, and I make sure that I talk to the kids and my husband every day. Doug and I have been kind of, traveling. We're trying to cover a lot of ground, so we're not with each other every day these days. But my family grounds me in every way. But if I can just speak to what people are feeling. We cannot despair. We cannot despair. You know, the nature of a democracy is such that I think there's a duality. On the one hand, there's an incredible strength when our democracy is intact. An incredible strength in what it does to protect the freedoms and rights of its people. Oh, there's great strength in that. And it is very fragile. It is only as strong as our willingness to fight for it. And so that's the moment we're in. And I say do not despair, because in a democracy, as long as we can keep it in our democracy, the people, every individual has the power to make a decision about what this will be. And so let's not feel powerless. Let's not let and I get it, overwhelming nature of this all make us feel powerless, because then we have been defeated. And that's not our character as the American people. We are not one to be defeated. We rise to a moment, and we stand on broad shoulders of people who have fought this fight before for our country. And in many ways, let us look at the challenge then that we are being presented and not be overwhelmed by it. The baton is now in our hands to fight for, not against, but for this country we love. That's what we have the power to do. So let's own that. Dare I say, be joyful in what we will do in the process of owning that, which is knowing that we can and will build community and coalitions and remind people that we're all in this together. Let's not let the overwhelming nature of this strip us of our strength. That's how I feel about this. You know? That's how I feel about this.
So I want to thank everybody here. You heard from the Vice President, from Congresswoman Cheney, do not despair. I think you got a great glimpse into who this woman is, what brings them together, why they're here, why they want to earn your vote, why they wanted to speak with you today. And I want to leave you with this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that I think speaks to this moment. It says, "Whatever course you decide upon, there is always someone to tell you that you're wrong. There are always difficulties arising which tempt you to believe that your critics are right. To map out a course of action and follow it to the end requires great courage." So I leave you with that. All of you are courageous people. Do not despair. Thank you so much for spending your time. Bravo. And we're going to move quick, okay? So I want this to be like a kitchen table. Like, just think that we're sitting around the kitchen table and we're jamming about all kinds of stuff. That's the feeling I want to have at this.
This is like a Kennedy family kitchen table, but most people don't have this many.
That's right. It's raucous, it's hot, but it's fun. That's what it's going to be like. So this, as I was saying before both of you walked out, this is historic. So I hope everybody takes this in for a minute. To have a leader of the Republican Party and the Vice President of the United States. So let me begin with you, Madam Vice President. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams that you would be running for president alongside Liz Cheney, who'd be advocating for you, campaigning for you, a member of an opposing party, putting herself on the line for you?
So let me just start by thanking everyone. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy lives to be here and have this conversation. And I think we are all here together because we have many things in common. First and foremost, we love our country. Ooh. We love our country. You know, so Maria, perhaps not, but
perhaps
not. But let me say this. So you mentioned, you know, my background. So I started my career as a prosecutor. And most of my career has been spent outside of Washington, D.C., not in Washington, D.C. And for most of my career, let me just tell you, I never once asked a victim of crime, a witness, are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? Never. It would have even occurred to me to ask that. What I did ask everyone, are you okay? And when I think then about what is at stake in this election, I think that's the biggest question. And it is a moment where, born out of our love of our country, born out of, for me, having taken the oath of office to the Constitution of the United States at least 6 times, I believe what is at stake in this election is so fundamental for us as Americans. And it is about, do we take seriously the importance of a president who obeys the oath to be loyal to the Constitution of the United States? Do we prioritize a president of the United States who cares about rule of law, much less the spirit with which they approach this most powerful position? There's so much about this last era. When I talk about turn the page, that's what I'm referring to, like the last decade, that has been about some powerful forces suggesting that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, instead of what I think most of us believe, regardless of your party affiliation, that the real measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. And so, for that reason, I'm not surprised that Liz Cheney and I are on the same stage 15 days before the election.
Okay. You know? Well, maybe you're not surprised, but I'm surprised.